Hello, humans. Hello, humans. Okay, so this is World War WEF. I'm a little bit irritated. I'm having to redo this. I'd spent some time, maybe 45 minutes or so, doing this whole little broadcast here about the World War WEF, only to discover that one of my cables was bad in my connection to my sound gear, so we had no sound. Anyway, so we're going to redo it, at least part of it. Unlike Max Egan, he says he can talk about whatever the fuck he wants. Or not Max Egan, Jeff Berwick. He's a more irritated fellow, but I like him too. But he's out there with his dog, and they're trucking along, and if he wants to talk about it, he will. This war is brought to you by Clif High's Pure Sleep, which you can get at purebulk.com, and I'll put a link down below. It's really good for you during these periods of the war because it helps you sleep, it helps you wake up the next day refreshed. You got human growth hormone precursor in there that gets your body all ready and repaired for the adventures of that day. But note that because we have GABA in there, this precursor to human growth hormone, you can't get this stuff shipped to New Zealand and a couple of other places Japan, because they've got it listed as a controlled substance. Anyway, so we're now in the outbreak of the war against the WEF, and it's global. We've had, let me see, it's a little dull. We've had recent activity. Okay, so there's ongoing activity here in the United States, especially in Arizona. But all across the United States, everything's in an uproar and in a roil. We've recently had volcanoes go off in the Hawaiian Islands. That's going to wipe out all of our theoretic carbon credit savings for the entire North America in like just a week or so. It'll just be gone because of so much carbon being spewed out by the volcano. This is so stupid, their climate shit, along with electric vehicles, but I'll go on further. Okay, so we've got all of Brazil involved in the war against the WEF. Need to make a note about that. And we've got Australia involved. Seriously, their birth rate's down 71%. Finally, they're getting some pushback. There was a politician in Queensland who's saying, "What the fuck? Why are not all these nations in rebellion against the WEF? We're being taken over by these motherfuckers." He didn't quite phrase it that way, but that was the intent. I wish the politicians would speak honestly, clearly, and profanely, and especially during profane times. These WEFers are truly evil, horrific things, and calling them motherfuckers is a kind, truly, it's not anywhere near representative of what we should be calling them. Anyway, so the birth rate's down in Australia, so we've taken a big population hit all across the planet, especially in places like China, but excepting in places like India and Russia and so on. Anyway, so we've got new stuff coming out of Sweden, where they're now going to institute an anti-Soros immigration policy, where they're saying all immigrants are temporary, no permanent immigrants coming in, and we're going to go and reclassify the ones that are here. So they're all reclassified as temporary too, because we can't afford them. I mean, it's just Norway and Sweden, the Soros is bankrupting those nations by getting them woke and saying they've got to do everything for these poor black people that Soros is bringing up in airplanes in every way he can from Africa. And the proportional burden on the welfare state by these immigrants is so huge that the Norwegian and Swedish economies are breaking down now, as is governance and the civil society and so on. So now we've gotten the first pushback out of Sweden, where they're saying no more immigrants. They're saying the ones that are here are going to be reclassified as temporary, no more permanent people from the outside. And they also know that it's all Soros and this kind of a deal. So now Sweden's actively involved in the World War WEF. We've also got China now involved. All of China, including Mongolia, has got riots. They had a situation at Foxconn, which was a iPhone production facility, huge iPhone production facility with hundreds of thousands of people involved, rioting, and they're against the empty sheet stuff. Has nothing to do with wages. The single blank sheet of paper is their protest symbol. Anyway, bear in mind that all the people in China, okay, so now the protests have spread all across China. Bear in mind that everybody in China that stands up and holds up a blank piece of paper now and gets themselves photographed doing so has placed their life at risk. And that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is going through and turning everybody's QR codes to red so that in their social order, they're not allowed to buy stuff, they're not allowed to travel and all of this. None of the machinery of the social order is theoretically going to operate for them. The people are pushing back. Also, by the way, if your code turns red, detention center, concentration camp, and you pay for it. You actually have to pay for yourself at that concentration camp. So, you know, this is a really strange system going on, and the people have finally had it, and they're finally understanding that the rest of the world is not suffering this way. It is so bad for them that the Chinese, when they were showing the soccer matches in Qatar, they had to block out all of the people in the stadium so that the Chinese people would not see that none of these people were wearing masks or PPE suits, because the Chinese people have been told that that's normal. I've even seen reports that the Chinese are being told that Westerners have to travel in airplanes in PPE suits. And there's photographs to this effect that are being hoaxed up. So the idea is, and so the Chinese people, in order to keep the Chinese people safe, the CCP has instituted these policies. Basically, that's what they're saying. Anyway, that hoax is falling apart. People are rebelling all throughout China. We've got major developments going on in terms of people just standing up and doing things that will result in them being severely penalized by the CCP unless they bring the CCP down. There's so many cities involved now that the Foxconn, which was the initial point of one of the sparks for this, okay, so the other spark, let me state, was the burning of 4 floors in an apartment building. It was apparently a very large apartment building, and 4 floors burned. Everybody was welded in. The firefighters couldn't get close to put the fire out, some of them being burned alive. And so all of the other Chinese people, also under lockdown conditions, very afraid of the situation that's affecting their lives in their apartment building, don't want to be in that next apartment building that's going to catch fire and not be able to be rescued by the fire guys, for which a lot of the people in China are now starting to think of that something ain't right, okay? Bear in mind that they live in the middle of propaganda that is so dense that they have not been able to get word in from the outside, really. And what does come in is so heavily trashed and polluted by the CCP, and so many feints and fake information coming. So the CCP will set up sort of a scam or a sting where they will have some information supposedly coming in from the West be fed in, and they will see who propagates that in order to come and deal with those individuals. But then later on, they'll debunk the crap that they put out. And so everybody looks foolish for having promulgated it. And they run this op continuously. The people have had it. They're in revolt all through China, and are joining the rest of us. Okay, so it's an information war, and we now have all the continents involved, including Antarctica, because the Russians have found this giant void in Antarctica, and they're telling people about it. They may have found things like a freshwater squid and all different kinds of weird stuff, which is going to come on out. But this void is massively huge. large enough to have taken a big chunk of the population if it wanted to go in there. We're talking, you know, a volume that is like millions of cubic meters. So new information coming out of Antarctica. So new information coming out all around the planet. We still have the Ukraine war ongoing, but more information is coming out of there. They're going to go to military trials pretty soon. There's rumors that the military is involved in Bolsonaro's situation versus Lula in Brazil, and that they're going to invoke this clause in their constitution in which the military can come on in because of a corrupt judge and corrupt politicians being part of the WEF and taking over their country, just like the guy in New Zealand is saying to his or in Queensland, Australia, is saying to his population, hey guys, you know, we should be in rebellion against this global reset. None of us voted for this shit. None of us voted for any of these mother weffers. Why are they in charge of all of this shit? Let's just get rid of the whole crop of them. And that's going on all over. The Brazilian population is getting an intense education in the WEF as a result of everything that's going on, right? We need a redo with paper ballots, and you check your ID off, and we got everything really tight from the get-go. None of this horse shit machinery and shit. So we can make some projections. We could speculate that no voting machinery will be in use a year from now or 2 years from now, that no one will have it because of the egregious activities of the WEF over these last 5 or 10 national elections here in the United States. So going back 40 years, they've been fucking with trying to get machinery in to deal with all of this stuff, to make it easier, safer, more secure, you know, because they lie continuously. So whatever they say, they're trying to do the opposite of it. It's a good rule of thumb. Okay, so China has announced that they're going to do double the number of coal plants, okay, because they're not going to go down the same route as the West with this horse shit on solar and wind. It just ain't going to happen. And that the gains that they had gotten out of the Three Gorges Dam are being used up. They need massive amounts of electricity for their population, which, as I say, is in revolt. And so maybe the CCP won't be in charge, and maybe we'll see 100 years of chaos in China as various different groups come to power and fall away as the Chinese people sort out their situation relative to their government. Or maybe they'll get, you know, the CCP will come back roaring strong and stomp everybody down and control everything. Or maybe it'll be, you know, 5 years of chaos and a new national government. Who knows? It ain't going to be the same, though, and the WEF ain't going to be in charge. I'm pretty sure the CCP is not going to be roaring back to life and taking over everything, especially after these last few years. So this is an information war that we're in. The nature of the information war is such that it is multidimensional in that it's not just the information that's here now. So this war involves us cleaning up our past, finding out what true human history is. The mother weffers, the people that are the mother weffers, have been dominating the used book market globally for about 500 years. So their purpose was to take books out of circulation. And so they were subsidized by various different groups within the organizations that they have as their culture. And they just bought used books, and a lot of the books were just simply such you couldn't get hold of these books. The internet presented them with a big problem because any of these books in a single instance of it could be duplicated and put out on the internet now, and it's as though all of their work for the last 500 years was for naught, because one copy of that book survived the 500 years. It gets digitized, and now they've got too many copies and the inability to remove it from circulation. So we're sort of okay there. But what's interesting about this from that perspective is that we're going to be going back several thousands of years. And we now have this all about history that the WEF is trying to control. And we now have some interesting stuff coming out about our recent history and about our ancient history. The recent history stuff is both coming out of Antarctica, to the west. Now, in a related part of the information war in Tibet, we get the discovery here of a huge cache of books, thousands, tens of thousands, that cover human history going back 1,000 years. So some books that were presumably written 500, 600, 700, 800 years ago that discuss events in their recent past have been discovered, and we've got a lot of them that have never seen the light of day before. There was a giant wall in the monastery. They had to do some remodeling, as is so often the case. They removed the wall to discover that that wall was warm because it was insulated with all these massive amount of books. Not books as we know it, more like folded leaf kind of, thick-paged book. Nonetheless, though, thousands of them. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of there. Okay, so we can connect current history to ancient history fairly easily. So there's this, in showing you the layers in this particular war. So there's this company that is a fashion house. They make weird-ass clothing. They employ, in their modeling, in a capacity as a model, they employ Kamala Harris's stepdaughter. This company is I think it's called Balankia, something like that. I'd have to go and look at the name. I've only seen it once or twice. Which is funny. I'll have to actually go and look at the name offline here. I wonder if it means balance, if it's Italian for balance. Anyway, I'll have to go and check it out. But what's interesting about it is that there's this photo that's now out of a crime scene tape, right? A roll of tape with this company's name on it, and they spell the middle part of the name as Ball. Let's do that as B-A-L. Okay, so, and so they've added an extra A in there for this pointer to ball. Now, everybody on the internet is freaking out about this ball business because they think that these people are worshiping this god that they call Baal, which is associated with the Bahopmet graven image, and is, but this is the funny part of this. Maybe that fashion house doesn't have a tight control on their people. Maybe their people are really stupid and actually think Baal is the name of a god, but it is not. It is one of the many untranslatable words that we get from the El. The El were space aliens that came down and interacted with 12 Yemeni tribes, convincing these 12 tribes that they were gods. These space aliens then commanded these 12 tribes to emigrate to Judea, and they became the Judeans. These tribes included people that would later on become Moses, Abraham, etc. None of these people were Jews, right? We don't even see the term Jew show up until the Middle Ages. We don't see any references to any Jews anywhere except from Central Europe and from about the 1300s on. The Ashkenazi, aka the Khazarians, are desperate to tie their lineage to these Judeans that are these 12 tribes of Yemenis that the El came and conquered. Okay, the El, one of the words the El used was Baal. We don't know what it meant. It was a title for these various different individuals. We think it might have meant like colonel, or a major, or a general, or even a surgeon. All of the Baal were involved in DNA. All of the Baal also were involved in what we could think of as enforcement activities, right? So if the tribes got out of line, the Baal would be summoned by these other El, and the tribe would get the shit kicked out of them. But the Baal were not motivated on their own. They weren't reacting on their own. They were reacting because they were told to. They were commanded to go and do this. The Baal served a function as a lateral area within the society of the L, the space aliens, the ball were a category of people, of individuals. And so there were many different ball. And so there was a ball toad, okay, T-O, and sort of a D sound. There was a ball that was a ball zebub, which we transliterate through the alphabet, change the alphabet, but keep the phonetics, and we call it as Beelzebub. Ball zebub, right? And so there were many of these ball people. So now maybe the people at the fashion house are really fucking stupid, low information, blue hair people, and they think ball is a person rather than a title. Now, so they indeed may be doing all of this stupid ass, satanic kind of crap, not knowing anything about any of the symbols or the words they're using, and just, stabbing in the dark, really ignorant individuals. Okay, so maybe that's the case. Maybe it was put there in order to trigger this reaction out of the conservatives. This reference kind of stuff, right? Whatever. It was sort of, I thought it was kind of funny that they should put that name in there. You would think that the Khazarians would understand their own symbology and their own links to real history more. Many of them do not. It's a failure in their social order, in my opinion. Anyway, so ball as a category of people, the individuals within the L's social order that were the ball, they were in charge of DNA. And they were also, okay, and so from that association, the L would find some DNA that they particularly liked. They would call the ball their local one. That guy would show up at this particular place, put a spell on everybody, wipe out all of their memories, and monkey with the DNA of a particular female. She would become pregnant then. Many of them had not been pregnant up until that time. And so there were miracles associated with the ball. And then they would get a new strand of DNA to go and screw with, right? To mess around with and attempt to grow whatever their purpose was, which we cannot do anything but speculate on. This is what the purpose of the ball was. These were the people that occupied the role of the Gabriel, which we translate as Archangel Gabriel, okay? And it was also a title, but it was a very specific title, and it referenced a function that the ball performed with the DNA on humans. So monkeying with the human DNA was an aspect of the word that we have translated as Archangel Gabriel. I love language. It gets you way back. So, for instance, we find